The Universal Technology Index credits humanity with proving innovation has no limits. Part 1. As had been an indexer for 300 cycles, in all that time, he had never seen anything like this. He sat in his workstation deep within the archive complex, his four eyes scanning the data streams that floated in the air before him. The Universal Technology Index was the most comprehensive database in the known galaxy. Every species that achieved space travel submitted their technologies to be measured and classified. It was a system that had worked perfectly for 47,000 cycles. Until today. The humans had just submitted their first batch of technologies for review, as had been excited when the assignment landed on his desk. A new species was always interesting. He had pulled up their file, ready to slot them neatly into the existing categories like every other civilization before them. But nothing about humanity was neat. As stared at the first submission, according to the documentation, humans had developed a faster-than-light communication device. That was impressive for such a young species. He began reading the technical specifications, expecting to see the standard components, quantum entanglement matrices, dark matter condensers, perhaps some exotic particle manipulation. Instead, he found coffee makers. As blinked all four eyes and read it again. The humans had taken commercial beverage preparation devices, modified them with something called duct tape, added components from their entertainment systems, and somehow created functional FTL communication. The efficiency ratings were good. The design was certified, but it made absolutely no sense. He moved to the next submission. Medical nanobots designed for emergency field treatment, standard enough. But the humans had built them using parts from children's toys and broken household appliances. As checked the verification stamp 3 times, it was real. The third submission made him stand up from his chair. The humans had taken a basic asteroid mining laser, the kind every spacefaring species used, and combined it with heating elements from their food preparation technology and elastic polymers they called rubber bands. The result was a terraforming tool that was 30% more efficient than anything currently in the index. As sat back down slowly, his mandibles clicked together in confusion. Every species in the galaxy had a pattern, the specialized in energy systems. Over 12,000 cycles, they had perfected their craft, building bigger and better power generators. They had devoted their entire civilization to biological technology. They had spent 15,000 cycles becoming the masters of computational systems. Each species found their strength and pushed it to the limit. That was how innovation worked. You picked a path and followed it to its conclusion. The humans seemed to have missed that memo entirely. As spent the next 3 hours reviewing the rest of humanity's submissions. There were 67 technologies in total. They touched on 42 different categories in the index. Some submissions crossed so many boundaries that as couldn't figure out which primary category to assign them to. More disturbing was the pattern he was beginning to see, or rather, the lack of pattern. The humans didn't specialize. They didn't focus. They seemed to grab whatever materials were available and smash them together until something useful emerged. One of their submissions was a gravity manipulation device built from recycled spacecraft parts, old computer chips, and what the documentation cheerfully described as a lucky horseshoe because why not? It shouldn't work. According to every principle in the index, it absolutely shouldn't work. But the test results showed it did work, beautifully. As sent an urgent message to his supervisor, senior archivist. Within minutes, she appeared at his workstation, her silver robes trailing behind her. "This better be important as," she said, "I was in a council meeting." He gestured at the floating data. "We have a problem, the humans." His expression shifted from annoyed to interested. She had been an archivist for 500 cycles and had personally overseen the integration of 30 new species into the index. She leaned forward, her eyes scanning the information. Her silence stretched for a full minute, then two. Finally, she spoke. "This can't be right. I everything twice, as said. Then I had the verification teams check it again. It's all legitimate." Pulled up a holographic display and began running analysis protocols. The index's quantum processors hummed as they attempted to find classification matches for humanity's technologies. Error messages began appearing in the air. "The system can't process this," whispered. "It's treating these submissions as corrupted data because they don't match any known development patterns." She turned to as her expression grave. "Call an emergency session of the Archival Commission. Tonight." 6 hours later, as stood before the full Archival Commission in the Grand Chamber, 50 of the galaxy's leading experts on technological development sat in tiered seats, their attention focused on him. He had prepared a presentation, but looking at the assembled experts, he decided to be direct. "Humanity breaks every rule we have," he said simply. He displayed the coffee maker FTL device. Gasps echoed through the chamber. "This violates the principle of purposeful design," Commission member said, his voice sharp. "You don't build advanced communication systems from beverage equipment." "Humanity does," as replied. He showed them the medical nanobots, the terraforming tool, the gravity manipulator. With each example, the murmuring in the chamber grew louder. "This is chaos," another commission member declared. "There's no focus, no discipline, no clear technological identity." "Exactly," as agreed. "And that's the problem. How do we classify them?" The debate that followed lasted for 3 hours. Some members argued that humanity should be rejected from the index until they developed a more organized approach. Others suggested that the human submissions were flukes, early experiments that would eventually settle into normal patterns. Senior Archivist listened to it all, then stood. The chamber fell silent. "I've been studying the human submissions," she said, "and I've noticed something. They're not just combining technologies randomly. They're solving problems in ways we never considered because we never had to. Each of their innovations addresses a specific need using whatever resources were available." She pulled up a detailed analysis. Take their FTL communicator. Humans developed space travel relatively recently. They don't have access to the exotic materials other species use for quantum systems, so they improvised with what they had, and somehow it works. "That's not innovation," argued. "That's desperation." "Perhaps," said quietly, "or perhaps it's something we've forgotten. When was the last time any of our established species created something truly new?" The silence that followed was uncomfortable. As found himself thinking about they had perfected energy systems 4,000 cycles ago. Since then, they had made minor improvements, tiny optimizations, but nothing revolutionary. The same was true for most species. Once you reached the peak of your specialization, innovation slowed to a crawl. But humanity hadn't reached any peak. They were still climbing, still experimenting, still trying new things. "I propose we create a new classification," said. "Something beyond our current system. We need to acknowledge that humanity's approach, while unconventional, is producing real results." The commission voted. It was close, but its proposal passed. Over the next several days, as worked with a team to create humanity's classification profile. They settled on a designation they had never used before: adaptive innovators, species that could work across multiple technological domains without specialization. As transmitted the classification to Earth, along with humanity's official acceptance into the Universal Technology Index. The response came back within hours. It was a message from the Human Liaison Office, cheerful and casual in a way that made Az's mandibles click nervously. "Thanks for the classification. We're honored. By the way, we've got about 14,000 more technologies ready for submission. We've been working on a bunch of new stuff. Should we send them all at once or break them up? Let us know. 14,000. As looked at, who had gone very still. They've had faster-than-light travel for less than a century, she said slowly. How did they develop 14,000 new technologies? As didn't have an answer. He was beginning to realize that when it came to humanity, he might never have answers, only more questions. He opened the first file from the new submission batch. It was a revolutionary medical device built from what the humans described as spare parts from that old printer nobody uses anymore, plus some stuff we found in the garage. It was going to be a very long cycle. Part 2. 6 cycles passed, as no longer slept well. The human submissions had not stopped. If anything, they had accelerated. What started as 14,000 technologies had grown to 23,000, then 40,000. The archive complex's quantum processors, designed to handle any conceivable data load, were beginning to show strain. As sat in an emergency strategy, meeting with senior archivist and 3 other senior indexers. On the holographic display between them, error reports cascaded like a red waterfall. The system is failing, indexer said flatly. She was her computational mind usually unshakable. Today, she looked rattled. 90% of human submissions require entirely new classification frameworks. The quantum processors can't build frameworks fast enough. Pulled up a statistical analysis that made everyone in the room go quiet. In 6 cycles, humanity has submitted more unique innovations than the previous 500 cycles combined from all other species, she said. And these aren't minor variations. Each one represents a fundamentally new approach to problems we thought we had already solved. As thought about the submission he had reviewed that morning, humans had taken this biological scanner, a piece of technology that had remained unchanged for 3 centuries, and combined it with something called a graphics processing unit from their video game systems. The result was a medical diagnostic tool that could predict diseases before any biological markers appeared. It shouldn't work. The technologies weren't compatible, but humanity had made them compatible anyway. We need to inform the Galactic Council, said. This is beyond the archive's ability to manage alone. The presentation to the Galactic Council took place in the Grand Assembly Hall on the planet OK. Representatives from 200 species gathered to hear what Council member Ara of the Academic Consortium had to say. Ara was a careful speaker, known for measured words and thorough analysis. Today, she looked like someone who had seen something that challenged her understanding of reality. Humanity has achieved what we believe to be impossible, she began. They have created technology that invents more technology. The assembly hall erupted in noise. Representatives stood, shouting questions, demanding clarification. Ara waited for silence, then continued. They call it open-source collaborative innovation. Humans share their designs freely across their entire population. Anyone can modify, improve, or combine existing technologies. What one human creates today, 1 million others are improving tomorrow. She displayed examples. A simple energy storage device created by a human student had been modified by 300 other humans within 1 planetary rotation. Each modification made it better. By the end of the week, that storage device was outperforming systems that had taken 1,000 cycles to perfect. This is madness, declared the ambassador. Innovation requires discipline, careful planning, rigorous testing. You cannot just let anyone modify critical technologies. That's exactly what humans do, Ara replied, and it works. As watched the assembly's reaction with fascination. These were representatives of civilizations that had existed for, species that had mastered space travel when Earth was still covered in primitive life. And they were frightened. Not of human weapons or ships or territory. They were frightened of human creativity. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Some species wanted to restrict human access to the index, claiming they were destabilizing the established technological order. Others wanted to study humanity's methods. A few, like the ambassador, looked intrigued. It was the who made the next move. 3 weeks later, as received an urgent communication from their lead researchers had done something unprecedented. They had asked humanity for help. They had a problem. Their biological integration technology, which they had spent 8,000 cycles perfecting, had hit a wall. They couldn't make their systems more efficient without completely rebuilding from scratch, which would take another 1,000 cycles. They had sent the problem to Earth as a challenge, expecting months of careful analysis. Humanity responded in 72 hours. A human team had taken one look at the systems and said, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" The researchers had been insulted. These systems were incredibly complex. You didn't just restart them. But the humans had insisted. Not a simple restart. A complete power cycle with specific timing intervals, combined with percussive maintenance which, as learned with some horror, meant hitting the machines in precise locations. They tried it, mostly to prove the humans wrong. Efficiency jumped by 6%. The researchers stood in their laboratory, staring at the readings in disbelief. 6% was more improvement than they had achieved in the last 200 cycles of careful optimization. "How did you know?" they asked the human team. The lead human engineer, a woman named Martinez, had shrugged. "Your systems were too perfect. Sometimes when you optimize too much, you create new inefficiencies. We see it all the time with our own stuff. A good whack and a reboot fixes it." Word of the incident spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within weeks, other species began reaching out to humanity with their unsolvable problems. They sent their energy efficiency designs. They submitted computational challenges. The ancient confederation of older worlds, who never asked anyone for anything, quietly transmitted 3 problems they had been stuck on for 5,000 cycles. Humanity's response was to host something they called a hackathon. As traveled to Earth to observe, he had never visited the human before. It was chaotic, crowded, and somehow charming in its disorder. The hackathon took place in a massive facility that humans had built in just 6 weeks specifically for the event. 50 species sent representatives, each bringing their most challenging problems. The rules were simple. Teams had 72 hours to create working prototypes using whatever materials they could find. As watched in amazement as humans teamed up with and dozens of other species, language barriers slowed things down only slightly. The humans taught everyone their approach: try things, fail fast, learn, and try again. An engineer named found himself working with a human teenager who kept suggesting ideas that violated every principle of energy systems design. At first, dismissed them, but after the 4th suggestion, he decided to test one just to prove it wouldn't work. It worked. By the end of hour 12, was actively asking the teenager for more bad ideas. By hour 48, they had created a power system that was operating at 99.1% efficiency. The theoretical maximum was 99.3%. When asked how this was possible, the teenager grinned and said, "I didn't know enough about your rules to know what couldn't work, so I just tried everything." The hackathon produced 200 functional prototypes, not concepts or theories, but actual working devices. Problems that had stumped civilizations for centuries were solved by mixed teams in under 3 days. As interviewed dozens of participants afterward, the response was universal. Working with humans was frustrating, chaotic, and utterly transformative. A computational specialist named X said it best: "Humans don't see problems the way we do. We see obstacles, they see puzzles, we see limits. They see suggestions. It's infuriating and brilliant at the same time." Back at the archive complex, as worked late into the night, trying to create new classification systems that could handle humanity's innovations. He was designing his fourth new framework of the week when appeared at his workstation. "I've been analyzing human failure logs," she said without preamble. As blinked, their what? Humans keep extensive records of experiments that didn't work. They call them failure logs. They have archives of technologies that failed, ideas that didn't pan out, prototypes that exploded or caught fire or simply refused to function. She pulled up a data display. They have 80 billion entries in these archives. I stared at the number, 80 billion failures. I thought it was interesting, so I had our analysis teams review them. The expression was strange, somewhere between awe and disbelief. 23% of their so-called failures are actually breakthroughs in fields that don't exist yet. They failed at what they were trying to do, but accidentally succeeded at something else entirely. She showed him examples. A human team trying to create a better battery had instead discovered a new form of matter. Another team working on communication devices had accidentally invented a medical scanner. A particularly spectacular failure involving food preservation technology had somehow led to a breakthrough in faster-than-light travel. "They fail more than any species in galactic history," said softly, "and they treat each failure as data for the next attempt." As understood then why the index was struggling. The system was designed to success. It couldn't comprehend a species that learned as much from failure as from achievement. "We need to redesign the entire index," he said. Nodded. "I know, I've already started. It's going to take years." "Do we have years?" As asked, looking at the cascade of new human submissions flowing into the system. Didn't answer. They both knew the truth. The index wasn't measuring humanity's innovation anymore. It was just trying to keep up. Part 3. The grand ceremony of recognition happened once every 1,000 cycles. It was the index's most prestigious event, attended by representatives from across the known galaxy. The ceremony recognized the single most significant technological achievement of the millennium. As stood backstage in the massive amphitheater on OK, adjusting his formal robes nervously. In 312 cycles as an indexer, he had never expected to be at the center of galactic attention. But then again, he had never expected humanity. The past 2 cycles had been transformative, not just for the index but for the entire galaxy. After the hackathon, something fundamental had shifted. Species that hadn't cooperated were now working together in what humans called maker spaces. Ancient rivals were sharing technology. The rigid boundaries between different fields of study were dissolving. They had opened their energy research facilities to other species for the first time in 6,000 cycles. They were teaching biological integration techniques to anyone who wanted to learn. Even the isolated confederation of older worlds had begun cautiously participating in collaborative projects. All because humanity had shown them that innovation wasn't a competition, it was a conversation. The ceremony began with traditional acknowledgments. Past achievements were honored. The progression of galactic technology was celebrated. Then Council member Aura took the stage, and the atmosphere in the amphitheater changed. "In all the history of the Universal Technology Index," she began, "we have never nominated an entire species for the Platinum Pinnacle Award. Individual achievements, yes. Revolutionary discoveries, certainly. But never has a species so completely transformed our understanding of innovation itself." The holographic displays around the amphitheater lit up with data. The audience, representatives from 200 worlds, watched in silence as the numbers told their story. In 8 cycles, humanity had contributed more unique innovation than the previous 500 cycles combined from all species. They had solved 7,000 problems that the galaxy had classified as unsolvable. They had created 16 new fields of study that hadn't existed before. But more than that, They had changed how everyone else innovated. Aura showed examples. They had been stuck at 97.3% energy efficiency for 4,000 cycles, convinced they had reached the theoretical maximum. A human engineer had looked at their systems and suggested percussive maintenance, the technical term for hitting the machine in the right spot at the right time. They had been insulted. Their technology was sophisticated, refined, perfected over. You didn't just hit it. But they had tried it, mostly to prove the humans wrong. Efficiency jumped to 99.1%. 4,000 cycles of stagnation ended with a well-placed impact and the willingness to try something ridiculous. Thus, computational systems, considered the absolute pinnacle of digital architecture, had been jailbroken by a human teenager. The delegation had been outraged until they ran diagnostics and discovered the modifications made their systems 400% faster. The teenager, when asked how she had accomplished this, had said, "I got bored during summer vacation and wondered if your security was any good. Turns out it wasn't, but I fixed it for you while I was in there." Laughter rippled through the amphitheater. Even the dignified representative was smiling. Backstage, as watched it all on a monitor, he felt his presence beside him. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted. "You'll do fine, just speak from the heart." His turn came. As walked onto the stage and the weight of 200 civilizations' attention settled on him. He had prepared a speech, formal and proper, befitting the ceremony's importance. He took one look at the assembled representatives and abandoned it. "I'm an indexer," he said simply. "My job is to measure, classify, and technological achievement. I've been doing this for over 300 cycles. I thought I understood innovation." He gestured at the holographic displays floating above the amphitheater. "Then humanity submitted their first technologies, and everything I knew became questionable. They built FTL communicators from coffee makers. They created medical devices from toys. They solved problems by hitting things and trying approaches that made no sense." Murmurs of recognition moved through the audience. Everyone had their own story about human innovation. "I spent the first cycle frustrated," as continued. "The index couldn't classify them. They didn't fit our categories. They had no specialization, no focus, no clear technological identity. I thought they were doing everything wrong." He paused, letting the silence build. "I was wrong. We were all wrong. Humanity didn't break our rules. They revealed that our rules were broken." He pulled up new data. Every species here achieved greatness by specialization. The mastered energy, the perfected biology, the conquered computation. We each climbed our mountain to the peak and planted our flag, declaring victory. The holographic display shifted, showing innovation curves for various species. Each one showed the same pattern: rapid advancement, then a plateau. But what humanity showed us is that the peak isn't the end. It's just the place where we stopped looking for new paths. They didn't climb one mountain. They wandered through the entire range, trying every trail, getting lost, failing constantly, but always moving forward. As met the eyes of various representatives, humanity has failed more in 8 cycles than most civilizations fail in 1,000. They've created 80 billion documented failures, and they celebrate them. They share them. They learn from them. He thought about the human engineer Martinez, who had revolutionized biology by suggesting they turn systems off and on again. He thought about the teenager who had jailbroken systems out of boredom. He thought about the 1,000 other examples of humans solving ancient problems with fresh eyes and absurd methods. "I cannot humanity's contribution to galactic innovation," as said, because implies boundaries. And humanity has proven that innovation has no boundaries, no limits, no rules that cannot be questioned. The amphitheater was silent, as could feel the weight of his words settling over the assembly. "The Universal Technology Index was created to measure achievement," he continued. But humanity has taught us that the greatest achievement is not reaching the peak. It's refusing to accept that peaks exist at all. He stepped back, which is why I recommend we award humanity the Platinum Pinnacle Award, not for any single innovation, but for proving that innovation itself has no limits. The vote was unanimous. Dr. Sarah took the stage to accept the award on behalf of humanity. She was young by human standards, barely 40 cycles old, but she had been instrumental in coordinating Earth's submissions to the index. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and confident. "We're honored, truly, but I need to clarify something important." She smiled, and Az recognized that expression. It was the look humans got when they were about to say something that would change everything again. "We didn't prove innovation has no limits," Doctor said. "We just refused to believe in the limits everyone else accepted. There's a difference." She pulled up a holographic display of her own. "You see, every species here is smarter than us. You've been exploring the galaxy for thousands of cycles while we were still figuring out fire. You have better technology, longer, more resources. By every logical measure, we shouldn't be able to contribute anything you haven't already discovered." The assembly leaned forward, listening. "But we had one advantage," Doctor continued. "We didn't know what was impossible. They told us 97.3% efficiency was the maximum. We didn't know enough to believe them, so we tried to do better. They showed us their computational systems and explained they were perfect. We didn't understand why they couldn't be improved, so we looked for ways to improve them anyway." She laughed softly. "Ignorance was our superpower. We failed at so many things because we tried so many things, and each failure taught us something new." Doctor's expression grew more serious. "But here's what we learned from you. You taught us that our chaotic approach wasn't just valid, it was valuable. You gave us problems that needed solving and trusted us to solve them. You worked with us even when our methods seemed insane. You shared your knowledge freely." She gestured at the assembled representatives. "This award isn't just for humanity, it's for all of us, because the real innovation wasn't any specific technology. It was remembering that we're better when we work together, when we share ideas instead of hoarding them, when we celebrate failures as much as successes." As felt something shift in the amphitheater. It was subtle but profound. A recognition that something fundamental had changed in how the galaxy approached progress. "Also," Doctor added, her grin returning, "while we were preparing for this ceremony, our team back home accidentally invented self-aware dark matter and a machine that converts negative emotions into renewable energy. We're still working out the documentation on those, and figuring out if the dark matter wants legal rights. It's been a complicated week." The amphitheater erupted in laughter. "So the innovation continues," Doctor finished, "and now we're all doing it together." The celebration that followed lasted for 3 days. Species that had barely spoken to each other and gathered in impromptu workshops, sharing ideas and collaborating on new projects. As watched and arguing enthusiastically about energy biology integration while a human mediated, suggesting increasingly absurd combinations that somehow kept working. On the 3rd day, found as in a quiet corner of the amphitheater gardens. "I've been thinking about the index," she said, sitting beside him. "Regretting your career choice?" as asked with a smile. "Never." She looked up at the twin moons rising over OK. "But I realized something. For 47,000 cycles, we measured innovation as a destination. Now we need to measure it as a journey. That's going to require a complete redesign," as said. "I know, years of work, maybe decades," she smiled. "Good thing we have humans to help us. They'll probably find a faster way." As thought about that, in 8 cycles, humanity had transformed not just the index but the entire galaxy's approach to progress. What would the next 8 cycles bring? He pulled up his personal terminal and checked the latest human submissions. There were 300 new technologies waiting for review. The first one was a gravity manipulation device built from modified musical instruments and something called extreme cheese. He started laughing. "What is it?" asked. "Just humanity," as said, being humanity. The index's new classification for humanity was elegant in its simplicity, unbounded. No limits, no restrictions, no ceiling on what they might achieve. Somewhere on Earth, in a cluttered garage filled with failed prototypes, half-eaten pizza, and tools that weren't being used for their intended purposes, a human was staring at a collection of spare parts. "But what if we tried it backwards?" they muttered. And the innovation continued.